some people in the audience have heard about crowdfunding. How does crowdfunding differ from traditional equity financing?
It's a pretty broad set of stuff when you think about crowdfunding. I mean, the thing that folks have probably heard about is Kickstarter or Indiegogo, where you're crowdfunding essentially a promise that you might give you back something. There's no equity involved with that. It's non-equity crowdfunding. And you have to have kind of the right company and the right product for that to be interesting. I suspect it would probably be pretty hard for you to go out right now and get people to fund, the average guy or gal on the street to fund your company. But if you have particularly if you're building a consumer product where you could use non-equity crowdfunding as basically a pre-order, and the thing that something like Kickstarter really does that people don't think about is it's a great way to market your product, to get some visibility about your product, to test the market demand for your product. So if you go out with a crowdfunding campaign and say, well, you give us $100, you'll get 3 of our gizmos, and then you can take the results. If you take the results of that campaign, one of which is the money, which is great, but also the market demand to your next set of investors, you could get some investing there. So now, what I'm sure you've seen, it started with the Jobs Act a few years back, where we're trying to put equity crowdfunding in place, which is where instead of going to a accredited angel investor or a venture capitalist, you try and raise money from anybody out there. And so now let me break down this equity crowdfunding into kind of 2 buckets. One, equity crowdfunding from accredited investors, that is, investors that could just fund it as an angel would today. And then non-accredited investors, which is, again, just sort of anybody out there. Does everybody know what an accredited investor is? I'm assuming that, no, yes? Okay, I'll pause and, may I?
Yes, please.
Or would you like to? Or
no,
may I?
Go ahead,
okay.
Please.
So if you're going to go out and solicit an investment for a company, you have to get it from an angel investor. That angel investor has to be accredited, which means they have to have a net worth of $1 million or more, or $200,000 in income, something like that. High net worth individuals. Yeah. And the purpose of that is your startup is a pretty risky proposition. It's much riskier than buying a couple shares of IBM. And the securities regulations are trying to protect people that can't afford to lose their entire investment. Because the odds are an angel investor in your startup is either going to lose all their money, or you're going to hand them a pretty nice pile of money back. There's no in between like there is when you buy a share of IBM. It might go up 20%, it might go down 20%. It's an all or nothing. And the securities regulations are trying to protect people that really can't afford to lose a big wad of money. And so that's why you have to be an accredited investor to make an investment. So one way that has opened up in the last few years to crowdfund from accredited investors is something called AngelList. So it's basically a website where accredited investors can congregate. You can put your company up there, and these investors can see it, and it enables you to really, instead of just being able to talk to the angel investors in Greenville or Wilmington or Raleigh, you can get the word out to angel investors that are anywhere. And so it's a great thing, particularly if you live in a smaller town where it's not Silicon Valley. However, angel investing is usually a pretty local phenomena. If angel investors want to kind of see and touch your company because they're in at the early stage. So AngelList is not a great thing for you to just blast out there and say, hey, come fund my company in Greenville. Because an angel investor in Silicon Valley's got 800 deals they can look at within 3 miles. They're not going to get on an airplane, make 2 stops, drive from, they're not going to come here. But if you're trying to raise a $500,000 angel round and you can get a couple $100,000 funded locally, from angels here, angels in Raleigh, then filling out that round, then it's a viable option. So don't look at angel list as the first step. Look at it as the step to fill out the round. Then we've got the non-accredited crowdfunding, which is legislation is sort of, right now there's legislation in the state legislature that everybody supports. Everybody supported it the last session, and they're having a hard time pushing things through as things happen in our government. But hopefully that will happen. What that will do is enable anyone to make an investment in a company. Now, whether that's going to work or not is still to be determined. The challenge is, at least the current set of angels and current set of venture capitalists are looking a little skeptically at this. So now we have this mechanism. What if you get 1,000 investors in your company? You've crowdfunded 1,000 investors. They've each put $1,000 in, so you've got $1 million in your company now from 1,000 investors. How is that really going to work out, having that many investors in a small company with them and 2 angels and 1 VC? So it's all still to be determined. So again, I wouldn't look at that as your first step. If you can't get a angel investor who's experienced and knows about looking at companies to get excited about your company, do you really want, somebody from Chapel Hill who's got $1,000 to spend to put money in it? I don't know. The last point I'll make, sorry I've talked so long, but
great.
You asked the question. The last point I'll make on this, the one thing you do want to be very careful on is these regulations, the way, if you do not make a public solicitation for an investment, that is, you don't, take an ad out in the paper, my company's raising $1 million, come invest in it. Okay, that's a public solicitation. You're really only supposed to be talking to, in private about this. So if you do that and then you crowdfund, the onus is on you as the company and entrepreneur to verify that that person is an accredited investor with the regulations the way they are today. And so they'd have to turn over their tax returns to you. And once you've made it public, that onus is on you. The problem is most angels don't want to do that. If they're, and I apologize, I don't know all the which regulation, there's a regulation 37.62. I should have looked this up. But anyway, so long as you don't make the public solicitation, you don't have to verify that the investor is accredited. They self-identify. They say, yes, I'm an accredited investor. And as long as you don't have some obvious evidence that they are not, that's good enough. And so you really want to make sure you're still doing that. And by obvious evidence, I mean, they're driving a 95 Impala with 200,000 miles on it and living in a shack or something, so anyway.
So to summarize that, three types of crowdfunding. So you have kind of what's happening now, that's a donation or a pre-order,
Yep.
A pre-sale of
Kickstarter,
inventory,
like
Kickstarter and the like. That really doesn't pose any issues for raising later stage investment.
Correct.
Then you have crowdfunding from accredited investors, and that doesn't raise any issues either because they're accredited. Where potential issues may come up is if you're raising funding from non-accredited investors, and those regulations are forthcoming.
And in fact, you cannot do that in North Carolina yet. Hope you may be able to do it soon.
I've heard angel investors say they're not very excited about some of the proposed regulations coming down. In your opinion, do you think those regulations will happen anytime soon? If so, how will that affect the funding landscape?
It always seems it's 3 months away, and it's been 3 months away now for 2 or 3 years. So yeah.
Okay.